She is called the master of the page turner. She's written something for everyone, from science fiction to historical fiction, for ages from kindergarten all the way up through high school. I'm talking about the one and only Margaret Peterson Haddix, who will be joining me next, coming up on Books Alive. And thanks so much for joining us here today on Books Alive. This is our second season, and I'm very excited to tell you that we are kicking off this year with the one and only Margaret Peterson Haddix. Welcome to Books Alive.
Thank you.
This is really great to have you here. You're one of the champs. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Now, if you aren't familiar with her, if you're one of the 12 people out there in America that isn't familiar with her, she is probably best known for the Shadow Children series, which begins with Among the Hidden. But she's written for kindergarten all the way through high school. So, having said all of that, I thought what we could do is sort of show people the books for the younger kids and then move through and go to the older ones. And I'm going to kick off with one of my favorites, which is the fabulous Say What? Which is hilarious. Now, okay, you got to tell us about this. Where did this come from?
Well, mostly it came from when my kids were that age, kind of preschool, kindergarten age, feeling very frustrated that I was saying the same things over and over and over again, and realizing that it wasn't necessarily effective, what I was saying, and starting to wonder, do they even hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so I started kind of playing around with imagining, what if I said the wrong things at the wrong time? Like, if Johnny jumped off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge? When that was not at all the issue.
Right.
And that is what the parents in Say What actually do, that they very much confuse their children. And at the beginning, the little girl spills glitter in the living room, and her father doesn't tell her to clean it up. He tells her to stop picking her nose. And she's very baffled by that.
Like they've lost it. They've completely lost it.
Yes. So that it just kind of escalates. So I had a lot of fun having very weird things happen in that book.
What did your own kids say about this?
Well, the funny thing is, by the time the book came out, they were old enough that you know they
could laugh too.
Yeah, they could laugh too.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's really a lot of fun, and I think all parents would just completely be like, yes, this is our house. All right, now you've got 3 more that I would say are for like what, up to 3rd grade, kind of like.
Right.
Let's do The Girl with 500 Middle Names, because these 3 that we're about to touch on are so sensitive, and this one, I mean, I was thinking about it in terms of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Right.
What is that like? But okay, you want to talk a little bit about this one?
Well, this one, a girl has moved from one area to another because her parents want her to be able to go to a good school. And this also, there are some economic and class issues included in that, which of course she's not necessarily aware of until she's at this other school and everybody else is better off than she is. And it becomes an issue. But for her, the big issue is finding somebody to be friends with. And so the economic type stuff is all in the background, but it does play into her making a friend.
Yeah, I loved that idea of the parents trying to have like the upward mobility for her, give her that chance.
They wanted to give her an opportunity.
Yeah, and then her trying to fit in, and her mother knitting all the sweaters. I mean, that was so fantastic. And I think people can really identify with that feeling of wanting the good thing for their child. But the child who would read this, who would be 2nd, 3rd grade, would identify with that feeling of wanting to belong and fit in, yes. All right, what did I grab? Dexter?
Dexter.
Who is very tough. Be very careful around him. And you know, you read this and your heart breaks for him.
Right. He's actually not that tough. He's just going through a very rough time because his father is ill and he's been sent to live with his grandmother while his parents are dealing with his father's illness. And he is given a writing assignment on the very first day where he writes about a fight that he has. And absolutely the worst first impression you could make on a teacher is starting out by writing about how tough you are and how you've already had a fight on your first day of school. But this is a very smart teacher who manages to work with him and
great?
Finds out that there's much more to the story than just a fight.
You know what got me about this, Margaret, was how he started saying, well, maybe I am a bad kid. And if I'm a bad kid, heck, I can do anything I want, you know, it doesn't matter. And I thought, how many other kids get that feeling of, I must be a bad kid? And then, you know, wow, how do you pull them out of that?
It was very surprising to me in a lot of ways when this book was first coming out, and both in the reviews and from the publisher as well, they were saying, well, this is a book about bullying. It's a, you know, bullying is such an important topic. And my first reaction was, no, Dexter's not a bully. He's just a kid going through a really rough time.
Right.
And then I kind of stepped back from that and thought, well, probably that's true of a lot of kids who are
bullies. That's
yes.
exactly what I thought. I thought, there you are living in their skin and understanding why they're being so mean and aggressive and lashing out, you know. All right, now completely shifting here because of Anya. And I had never heard of this, which I cannot pronounce.
Alopecia areata, which is surprisingly a fairly common disease. Something like 4 million Americans have this disease. But it really is one that unless you know somebody who has it, you probably aren't that aware of it. Partly because a lot of people who have it wear wigs or do something. Alopecia, people lose their hair. And they're not really sick otherwise, but given the importance we place on appearance, it's a very devastating disease to have. And when I was doing research for this book, I read interviews with people who'd had the disease, including one woman who had had it for many years and was totally bald, but her husband didn't even realize it because she'd been very careful about wearing the wig around the clock. And online, she was confiding that she thought maybe she needed to let him know that she had this, but she was terrified.
Oh my gosh.
And so the girl in the book is a third grader who gets alopecia and basically has to deal with it. But there's also a lot of friendship issues in that because the other girls in her class are also dealing with kind of being aware that there's something going on but not understanding what it is.
And I read somewhere, I think, that, you know, Keely and Anya had been in class since the first grade. But Anya Keely had never noticed her and had never, you know, become friends. And I thought, how many times is that going to happen in classroom after classroom where these kids, you know, spend a couple years together, so how many hours, and they don't see each other, you know? So I thought that was really, really good. Now, okay, now these are all, like, you could read them aloud, especially that one to kindergarten. Third graders could read these, fourth graders for sure. And they're for the younger kids. Now, you as a kid grew up on a farm.
I did.
And out in Ohio, and we were talking at lunch about, I had read lists of the books you read when you were a child, and they were the Louisa May Alcott books and the Anne of Green Gables, and I said to you, they all seem to be strong girl characters, but Margaret, I'm not seeing any science fiction here, so now you got to tell me the secret that you wouldn't tell me before.
It just, I did read a lot of science fiction as well, but it was funny because I kind of thought of science fiction as my brother's books, because my brothers were very much into science fiction, and it was more that I'd kind of sneak, and, well, I didn't sneak, they knew that I had their books, but I would be pulling books off their shelves.
Like what? Can you remember?
Oh, like kind of the classic Asimov and Heinlein and things like that. Maybe a little bit older than when I was reading Anne of Green Gables, but a lot of those kind of books. And my grandfather was very interested in science fiction and kind of the, he had a very good collection of books from the 50s, kind of the classic science fiction type things, and a lot of short stories in science fiction that he would pass along to all of us.
You come from a family
so I got
of readers.
all of it. Oh, very much so, yes.
Wow. Yes. All right, now, wanting to be a writer. When did that start?
Probably about the time that I realized there was such an occupation, that it wasn't just that books magically appeared.
And when would that have been? 10?
About 8, I would say, because I can remember in 3rd grade writing a lot, and kind of what we would nowadays call fan fiction, that I would take books that I had read and I'd use those characters in little stories that I would write to grow out of those. And then I went from that to writing my own stories. And it just kept going.
All right. Now, Running Out of Time is your first published book,
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. And that was 95? Okay. And I think every 4th or 5th grader has read this book.
A lot of kids have, yes. I don't know if it's every, but a lot have.
It is so cool.
Thank you.
I mean, you totally get drawn in there at the beginning, and you turn the tables on us really fast.
Right.
Yeah. You're called the master of the page turner. Did you know that?
I have heard that.
Okay. And that would be this one. Okay. How on earth did you come up with the idea for this?
Well, my first few jobs out of college were at newspapers because it seemed like a more reliable way to earn an income rather than trying to start out writing fiction. So I had majored in journalism as well as creative writing. And so I was working as a reporter for the Indianapolis News, which at that time was the afternoon newspaper in Indianapolis. And near that is a restored historic village called Conner Prairie. And so I had done a newspaper article about the workers there who dressed up in period costumes and were kind of like historic reenactors. And one of the people that I talked to said that there were times in Conner Prairie when she would almost forget that it wasn't the past. And that stuck with me and made me start thinking about the village that's in Running Out of Time, where the kids don't realize that it's not the early 1800s.
Speaking of the village, do you know the movie The Village?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any reason why they seem to have copied you so beautifully?
I have no idea. I can't really answer that.
Okay.
There were a lot of people when that movie came out who pointed out a great deal of similarities between my book and my book came out in 95, and I believe that movie was 2004.
Okay.
So.
When I heard my daughter describe the plot, I said, "There's a book called Running Out of Time." It's like, it's been out forever. Okay, so that was number 1, and the girl in this is pretty strong.
Yes.
She is not going to give up.
Exactly.
She keeps going. Okay, now I'm saying 9, 10 years old out there.
Up to 12 or 13.
Okay.
Yeah. I think technically, if you look, it says 8 to 12 is the official age, but
yes, it does.
Exactly. There you go.
Okay, all right. So they're the experts. Okay, now let's go straight to the Shadow Children, which is Among the Hidden. And boy, kids love this.
I definitely get the most feedback about this
these
book and this series. Definitely.
Okay. All right. Now, a third child. I mean, this sounds a little like a country that we all know here on the planet. Did you get the idea from that society?
I was aware of that. It was actually when my husband and I were talking about whether or not we should have a third child, and we started talking about issues of overpopulation and resources for the earth, and really heavy topics. And as we were talking about that, I had this sense at one point, well, if that were all so important, there'd just be a law that nobody could have more than 2 kids. And instantly I stopped thinking as a parent and started thinking as a writer, and I thought that would be fascinating in a book. And certainly I was aware of what then was a very strong one-child rule in China, but it wasn't something that I'd really thought about deeply until my husband and I were making that very personal decision. And I thought, what a difference it would be to not have the power to make that decision for ourselves.
Okay, when you wrote the first book, did you know that you were going to make it into a series?
I did not.
And so how did that happen? How do you create a good series, and why did it keep going?
Well, mainly it was because a lot of people kept telling me that I had to continue it and make it a series, beginning with my husband and my brother, who were very determined.
Were there unanswered questions?
It is. This book does end with an open ending, which several of my books kind of have open endings. So I didn't think it was unusually open,
Right.
But I think it was kind of a sense that a lot of other people had, that they wanted to know what happened to Luke next and what happened to other shadow children. And so between kind of the pressure at home and also my publisher, Simon & Schuster, very much wanted me to do a continuation of that. And kind of, we tossed about a lot of different ideas about how it would be done, but I ended up skipping around a little bit and telling some other secret third children's stories, and kind of told about how the government changed over the course of the whole series.
Now, what do you hear from your kids who are reading it? What comes back to you?
I get a lot of questions from them about the government in the book. And it kind of made me think a lot about the differences between how we view the government now and how people talked about the government when I was a kid. And there was kind of a strong sense of, okay, the United States has democracy, and in other countries they have totalitarian governments, and I think there's maybe not as strong of awareness of that as there was when I was a kid.
Wow.
So I get a lot of questions about government, and I'm thinking, okay, talk to your social studies teacher about this, please.
That's very exciting. I mean, if teachers who were teaching social studies knew what a lead-in this is, that would be a fabulous thing.
Well, several schools have actually used that, where they've done a joint unit where it's parts of it are being studied in language arts and parts of it are being studied in social studies. And I give those schools so much credit, because I know a lot of times it's very difficult to marry those two things.
Yes, a cross-curriculum thing. Okay, now we are going to take a short break. But when we come back, we're going to take a look at all her fabulous books for older readers, and some I didn't even know were out there. So stay with us, we'll be right back.
When I need you, I just close my eyes and I'm with you, and all that I so wanna give you, it's only a
You don't have to be a hero to be a hero. When you adopt a child from foster care, just being there makes all the difference.
Do you like this top? It's so gay. Really? Yeah, it's totally gay.
You really shouldn't say that.
Say what?
Well, say that something's gay when you mean it's bad. It's insulting. What if every time something was bad, everybody said, "Oh, that's so girl wearing a skirt as a top"?
Oh, you are.
Those are cute jeans, though. When you say that's so gay, do you realize what you say? Knock it off.
Great things. Find out how a healthy lifestyle can help your child succeed.
Okay, that's good.
And welcome back. If you're just joining us, I'm sitting here today with the wonderful Margaret Peterson Haddix. Thank you so much for being here on Books Alive. And she and I were just talking about one of her newer books. She said it was published in 2007, and that is Uprising. And this is a little bit of a veering off the path for you, isn't it?
Somewhat different than a lot of my other books, yes, because it is straight historical fiction. Every other historical book I've done has been kind of combination science fiction, historical fiction. But this deals with the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire of 1911, and then also the strike that preceded that was the first strike that it was mostly females involved, the first strike in the United States where it was mostly females. And something that I did not realize until I started doing the research for that was that the suffrage movement, women trying to get the right to vote, a lot of the women who were very heavily involved in that were also very heavily in trying to get more rights for these workers. So it was a combination of a lot of fascinating events going on at the same time in the early 1900s.
And you've got three strong characters in here. Bella, who just immigrates and is trying to make money to send back home
Right.
for her truly starving family.
Right.
And then Jane, who lives a pretty good life, but is kind of starting to wise up a little bit.
Right.
And then is it Yetta?
Yetta.
Is that
Right.
pronunciation? And
That's correct.
she is very an activist.
Yes, very much an activist, very much a proponent of unions. And they do all three come from very different backgrounds. And it actually reflects the people who really were there at the time, because at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, a lot of the workers were teenage girls, essentially, who had emigrated from Italy or from Eastern Europe or some other places. And it was amazing to me to find out kind of the true stories behind what became my book, that these teenagers who were, my daughter at that time was about the same age, she was I think 15 as I was writing this book, that these teenage girls the same age as my daughter were basically supporting their families, having been sent to a country where they didn't know the language, didn't know how to get a job, and somehow were managing. So it was amazing.
You know, as a child, I remember reading different, maybe a historical biography or, oh, I don't know, there was a twin series that I read, and I learned so much of my history and had my pegs, you know, that I can hang my history on. And I think for girls to read this, or guys, you know, you get such a sense of that time of history that I don't think we teach this part of history that much. And I've always loved the word herstory. And this is great herstory. You know, our foremothers.
A lot of hers in there.
We're doing some pretty cool stuff. So, and they need some credit. All right, now jumping around to a book that I have a feeling is one of your more popular ones, Just Ella.
Yes.
You took on Cinderella. Now, it has a companion book here. Let me get my fingers out of the way. Palace of Mirrors, that I didn't know about. But I've heard,
it's new. It's okay.
Okay, I've heard the kids talking about it, and they really like it. But let's look at Ella here, because she's gotten out of the castle, Cinderella, and she's got the prince's favor, but they're not married yet.
They're not married yet. She's at the palace learning how to be a princess, because of course Cinderella did not start out as a princess. And she's discovering that royal life is maybe not everything she thought it was, and Prince Charming is maybe not so charming, because she'd known him probably about 3 hours before she agreed to marry him. So, you know, you kind of need to know people a little bit better than that. And the other thing that I kind of changed within my version of Cinderella is that my Cinderella does not have a fairy godmother who swoops in and fixes everything for her. She figures out on her own how to get to the ball, how to get out of the messes that she's gotten into.
Yeah, she's a very, very strong young lady, and it's interesting to watch her get the realization of what's going on around her. Now, this is for a much older reader.
Yeah, 12 and up
12
is
and up.
the age range for that one.
Okay, all right, yeah, so if you have a 9-year-old, this isn't the one for her. She really ratcheted this one up a little bit. Now, there's a line in one of these about, I have a little tiara in a box, but I can't show it to anybody. And it's that whole feeling of every girl in the world that secretly I am a princess. You know, you may not be able to see that, and I can't tell you, but you feel that. Were you playing on that feeling there?
I definitely was playing on that feeling there, although the way that I got that line in the beginning had a totally different source, which was that since I grew up on a farm and in a rural area, the county fair was a big deal. So I did indeed have a tiara, because I was a county fair queen attendant. And I thought of the sentence that became the first sentence in Palace of Mirrors, because it was Halloween time. My daughter wanted to be a fairy princess for Halloween, and I wanted to find my tiara from being a county fair queen attendant so that she could use that in her costume.
Wonderful.
And I realized that I had no idea where it was.
Oh, gee, wow.
So it was a really bizarre
chain of events there.
But,
all right, so you grew up on a farm. You came from a family that read a lot, including science fiction.
Very much so.
Were you a tomboy?
Not, in some ways, yes. I think it's very difficult to grow up on a farm and not have a certain amount of tomboyishness in you. I also come in between an older brother and a younger brother. And so, you know, you play with your brothers because they're the ones who are there. So I did a lot of things that definitely were tomboyish, but I was, in some ways, a very girly girl, too.
All right. Okay, now I'm going to ask you a question that I told you I might ask you.
Okay.
what strengths do you bring to writing?
That is a very difficult question to analyze for myself. I think I bring everything about my background and everything about what I've read. I think I also have a lot of curiosity about other people and about how other people think about things, and I analyze things a lot, so I think that's something that is a strength. And I think having worked as a reporter, that was something that definitely helped me be a better writer.
Now, you went to Luxembourg. How old were you?
It was when I was in college. It was a junior year abroad type thing.
And what I read was you asked yourself these fabulous questions, and I thought, gosh, everybody needs to do this at that age. Who am I? What do I believe? What do the people around me believe? Why do I believe what I believe? And what do I want to get out of life? Margaret, you've got 2 minutes now. All right, so did you know who you were, and has it changed at all in the however many years?
It's definitely changed, because I think that all the experiences that you have in life shape you as a person. And I think when I went to Luxembourg, I was 20 years old, and I had traveled some within the United States and, you know, kind of up into Canada and a little bit into Mexico, but not into a culture that was very different from where I had grown up. And even something little like where I grew up, lots of cornfields, soybean fields, you felt like you had a lot of space, you know, lots of elbow room, and that was not at all a concern. You know, there's lots of land out there. And then even to go to Luxembourg, which is a very tiny country,
been there,
lovely country, and I was staying with a family in Luxembourg, and you know, the houses are very close together
and lacy
and very very much, and it's a pretty orderly society. You know, they kind of have figured out how to live right on top of each other. And I mean, something like that, I remember pondering that and thinking how much of my perceptions of the world are shaped by the fact that I grew up somewhere where, you know, you could look out and not see the next person's property for acres and acres and acres.
You had a freedom of self.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it does, you have a different perception of the world when that's what your perspective is, versus when you know that if you're the slightest bit loud in your little room, that you'll be disturbing somebody else. It's a very different thing. So things like that, I encourage people to get as much exposure as they can to other cultures, because I think it really makes you understand yourself better, and it certainly helps you to understand other people better.
Well, and you learn, as you're saying, to put yourself in other people's shoes.
Exactly.
And like many of your characters do the same thing. But there's another thing about that, another aspect that I kept experiencing as I was reading your books, and that was that often in your books things are not as they seem. And let me grab, how about Turnabout? Because this is one of my favorite sci-fi books to offer when girls come in and they have that assignment and they're like, I have to read a science fiction. And I'm like, oh, I've got something for you. It's okay. So, all right. But this is pretty cool. So go ahead. Explain what you did here.
This book imagines what would happen if scientists figure out how to make people unage. And they take a group of old people in a nursing home and give them an injection, which I call rather ingeniously PT1. I'm not even sure how I came up with that, but that's what it's called. And then they begin going backward in age. So if they're 100 to begin with, after a year, instead of being 101, they're 99. And it's a total change. And the two main characters, Mellie and Annie Beth, unage all the way back to being teenagers again. And they are realizing that they need to find somebody to take care of them when they get so young that they can't take care of themselves. So it's a radical departure from the usual life that they've had.
Very Benjamin Button.
It is.
Very Benjamin Button. Very, very
And
cool.
I had been totally unaware of that story when I wrote Turnabout, and then I heard about the movie coming out, and it was interesting that it is possible for two people to have similar ideas.
Oh, well, for sure. Now, there's another one that I want to pair with this just a little bit. It's kind of behind you back there. It's Escape from Memory. And how many girls do a sleepover where they do the Ouija board, or they hypnotize each other, or you levitate someone? When I read that, I thought, my gosh, this is such an experience. But she finds out under hypnosis she doesn't even know who she is.
Right, that she has a secret past,
Yeah.
essentially, that she was totally unaware of. And she remembers escaping from extreme danger with her mother when she was a very small child.
Wow.
And it's quite a revelation to her.
Yes.
And when she tries to get explanations from her mother, the only thing that her mother will say is, some memories are better forgotten.
Ooh. And how could you live with that, deep, now throbbing inside of you? Like,
you
let me
have
out.
to find out.
Yes, you do.
Exactly.
So that's where you get your page turner reputation there. All right, let me lean over here. And what should we grab? Well, we could grab Double Identity. That would be fun.
Which is also a secrets in the past type thing.
Very much so.
About a almost 13-year-old girl who discovers some family secrets.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another do-do-do-do.
Yeah. Very weird, definitely.
Yeah, but all the girls are really strong characters, and it's so fun to have sci-fi with a girl. That's really great. So we won't tell you too much because we don't want to spoil it for you, but I would say this is for 11, 12-year-olds.
Yeah, it's kind of that, I don't know, 10 and up, maybe what it's officially labeled.
And she gets dropped off with a relative that she really doesn't know, and her parents just kind of drive off. And then even when she tries to call them on the cell phone, it's like, don't get in touch with us.
Don't.
So what the heck is going on? I mean, she just sort of disappears into this other world. So very cool. Okay, now let's grab, oh, I love this one.
Okay.
Don't you dare read this, Mrs. Dunfrey. Oh, now where did this come from?
That is another one that grew out of being a newspaper reporter, because I had done a series of stories about how the state of Indiana dealt with kids who had been abused and neglected, and talked to a lot of kids who had become wards of the state, and heard a lot of very sad stories, but also stories in which I was impressed so much with their spirit and their kind of self-awareness, that they understood that the way they had been treated as children was not right.
Wow.
And in many cases, they wanted to do something different with their lives, but were trying to find a way to do that and weren't sure how.
Well, you wonder, or I did the whole time I was reading this, because the girl is writing in a journal for her teacher.
Yes.
And you're wondering, is the teacher reading this at home or not, you know?
Right. Which she has said, I will not read it if you write, don't read this.
Yes, and she writes, don't read this for everything.
She says that about everything.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's really cool. Great cover, too, don't you think?
Yes.
That's really fun. All right, now I'm going to leave Leaving Fishers over there because I think we're going to, but that's a wonderful story about cults. I think we're going to run out of time, and I've got to grab Scent and Found.
Right.
Now, Found. First, I have to say that I really want you to write the book about Chippy, the annoying rodent.
Okay.
Because didn't your son come
My
up with
son,
that?
when I had part of this figured out, and I was trying to figure out what else to do with it to make it all make sense, I was talking about it one night at the dinner table with my entire family. My son, I believe, was in 7th grade at that point, and he said that everything should be caused by Chippy, the annoying rodent. And somehow I left out the annoying rodents.
Hey, just didn't make it in here. Well, I love to go and, I guess you can say book talk this book to kids, because when you tell them that the door opens to the jetway and every seat is filled, but there's not a sound, they're like, they're like, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And then fast forward 13 years later.
And well, should I say what was on the plane?
Sure.
Not a sound, but
Yes.
there were no adults, but every seat was filled with
Yes.
babies.
Yes.
36 babies on this
Yes.
airplane, and nobody knows where they came from,
Yeah.
where they were supposed to be going, or who they were.
Yeah.
And then 13 years later, there are these two boys, Jonah and Chip, who are talking to each other and discover that both of them were adopted as infants and don't know anything about their birth parents. And they, particularly Jonah, doesn't think it's a big deal, isn't really interested in it.
He's very comfortable.
His parents have done a very good job of explaining the whole process. But then he and Chip get mysterious letters. And the first one says, "You are one of the missing." And they don't know what to make of it. But then they get really panicked when they get the second one, which says, beware, they're coming back to get you.
Wonderful.
So, yes.
How great. Okay, now I haven't read this one. I just got it the other day, but this is book 2.
Yes.
Do you want to give us any teasers on this?
I will tell you, they get zapped back in time. It becomes a time travel series at that point.
Okay.
And they end up in the year 1483.
Wow.
Which most Americans probably would not instantly recognize that date.
Right.
And I would admit that I would not have recognized that date instantly either myself before I started writing this book. But it was the year that the Princess in the Tower, princes instead of princess, the 2 princes were disappeared from the Tower of London.
Oh my.
So it was, and the one boy was at one point King of England, and then he vanished.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I'm working off of that story.
Wow. How many more? Any idea how many more you're going to do?
The plan is to have 7 in the series as a whole.
Oh, how great. Okay.
So.
Oh, well, that's enticing. That's great. And again, these are probably for 10 and up, would you say?
Yeah, well, 8 and up,
you
probably.
would? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right, great. All right. Now, you've got another book coming out in what, the spring?
In November.
November.
I have a book called Claim to Fame coming out.
Yeah.
And it's about a girl who develops a very unusual talent. She develops the ability to hear anything that anybody says about her anywhere in the world.
Wow.
So if somebody's in Singapore talking about her, she can hear what they say.
Oh, my goodness.
And as you can imagine, it's not necessarily a great talent to have.
Yeah, yeah. That could be a little overwhelming.
Yes.
Oh, well, that sounds wonderful. Okay, now let me ask you some fun questions. What is the best criticism you ever got?
You're talking about criticism in the sense of that
Writing.
it's negative as opposed to just, you can say criticism is positive
Oh,
as well.
yeah, absolutely. It could be constructive, and maybe it helped you be a better writer.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, it's kind of hard to quantify the very best, but something that was very good that I didn't necessarily accept as good criticism at the time is I can remember when I was in 10th grade and I had a tendency to write a bit more than I needed to. Like if the assignment was write one paragraph, I tended to turn in like 10 pages or something like that because I was enthusiastic about it. And so my English teacher at that point, I think I had turned in about a 5-page paragraph. Well, it was 1 paragraph because I never stopped. She said, "You must cut this down to 1 page."
Wow.
And previously, I'd had a lot of teachers who'd be like, "Oh, you're enthusiastic about writing. That's great. Go ahead." And it was very good that she said that to me because it made me think, okay, I have to pick out what's really important. I can't just say everything I want to say. I need to pick out what's essential.
Wow.
And it was very good that she did that. And it did, I did manage to cut it down to something that was essential, and it helped me a great deal. And then it's funny because then later on, one of the jobs that I held as a journalist was that I worked for a little while as a copy editor, and sometimes I would have to take other people's writing that was maybe 25-inch stories and then cut it down to 15. And I would always think about my 10th grade English teacher when I would do that.
Kudos to the 10th grade English teacher. Okay.
Miss Davis.
Oh, all right, Miss Davis. Now, how many millions? Is it 41.5 million books you've sold?
Oh, 4.1.
4.1.
Something like that. 41 sounds excellent, but
4.1 million.
Yeah, I think that's one of the figures
Does
that's used
that
on there.
define success to you, or do you feel successful?
I think that for me, like just getting that first book published, at that point I felt very successful just to have gotten it published, because that was something that I wasn't sure was possible, since it is very difficult to get a first book published. And beyond that, I don't know that I'm really thinking about, okay, I need to have this particular peg to say, okay, now I'm a successful writer.
Do you feel it?
I guess, but there's it's always something that it's like, okay, well, that's not necessarily what I'm thinking about so much. I'm trying to write the best books I can.
Okay.
And that's really much more my focus.
All right. Have you written your best book?
I don't know.
Okay.
I kind of would like to say I hope not, because it'd be great if there's something even better out there.
Well, there are going to be 5 more of these. and you've got claim to fame, and goodness knows what else is churning around in there, right?
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much for
you're
taking
very
time out
welcome.
of your incredibly busy schedule to come and be with us today. You've written just some wonderful books. There's obviously something for every age range. And thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. And obviously, you know, there's plenty to pick from, and great if you've got a girl at home, especially a reluctant reader. So, as always, come and see us at the library.